Why do so many people feel permanently trapped in financial struggle? The reasons are less dramatic than most suspect. They are, in fact, mostly behavioral. Many people never realize how their own habits, not their circumstances, keep them confined to a cycle of scarcity. They spend more than they earn. They chase status through purchases instead of building stability through restraint. They assume that wealth requires extraordinary income, so they never bother to examine how ordinary incomes can lead to extraordinary outcomes through compounding. Worse, the fear of missing out drives them into debt, impulsive buying, and speculation, erasing any foundation they manage to build. These traps feel natural because they align with immediate human desires. They are also the exact practices that ensure one will never experience the power of compounding. Early wealth building is not glamorous. It is slow, sometimes painfully slow. Imagine cutting discretionary spending, saving diligently, and watching your balance creep up by what feels like insignificant amounts. Friends take vacations, neighbors drive newer cars. You skip dinners out and still end the year with what seems like an unimpressive sum. It can feel as if the effort is pointless. That perception is an illusion, one created by the mathematical reality of compounding. The beginning is when the curve is the flattest. The numbers barely move. Yet the entire promise of compounding rests on this unremarkable stage. The discomfort people feel here, the sense that nothing is happening while sacrificing present comfort, is why most quit. They stop just before the process shifts in their favor. Most people never experience compounding because they do not stay the course long enough. The point at which the returns from savings begin to matter is further down the line than they expect. Consequently, they make a tragic miscalculation. They look at the early totals and project that the future will look like a linear extension of the present. They fail to recognize that growth is exponential. They think that if it took years to save 5,000, then accumulating 100,000 must take many decades. That error convinces them that the game is rigged, that wealth is reserved for those born into it. This belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They stop saving, they indulge in lifestyle upgrades, they borrow to close the gap between what they desire and what they can afford, and they permanently foreclose on the possibility of compounding working for them. There is a threshold where the psychology of money changes. In purely numerical terms, it is modest. The first meaningful lump sum one accumulates, an amount that acts as a buffer. It is not millions. It is something closer to an amount that can absorb small emergencies without wiping out your progress. Once you cross this threshold, two things occur. First, you see proof that you are capable of saving. You are no longer someone who cannot manage money. You have evidence of discipline. This changes your identity from a spender to a saver. Second, the money begins to earn visible returns. A few $100s in returns on a few thousand in savings feels trivial. A few hundred on 20,000 feels different. It becomes clear that the money itself is doing some work. This is the moment when compounding becomes observable. It is not an abstract concept. It is cash appearing in your account without your labor. This small but concrete reward is what most people never see because they never cross that first threshold. What happens after crossing matters even more. Many people sabotage themselves right here. They celebrate by loosening their discipline. They buy the nicer car, upgrade their home, or take on new debts. They see a comfortable balance and decide they can now afford to indulge. This is the behavioral pivot that determines long-term outcomes. The money you accumulate begins to act like an employee working for you. If you let it continue working uninterrupted, its contribution grows steadily. If you constantly raid it or burden yourself with payments, you force that employee to take a break, or worse, lay it off entirely. Continuing to add to it feels mundane. It lacks the thrill of a major purchase or a speculative bet, yet it is the only way to shift the balance of labor from yourself to your capital. After the threshold, your job is to guard that capital fiercely and let it compound. Most people never see what happens next because they treat their early success as an excuse to spend. Patience and simplicity are the rarest virtues in wealth building because they feel like inaction. There is no applause for driving an older car or living below your means. There is no immediate gratification from continuing to save after years of frugal living. Yet patience does something dramatic that impulse cannot. It allows time to amplify your small efforts into something large. The process rewards boredom. The less you tinker, the better. Selling an investment that is working because you want to feel active is one of the most damaging behaviors. Every time you sell, you owe taxes. Every time you trade, you risk being out of the market at the wrong time. Every unnecessary adjustment interrupts the compounding process. Simplicity, defined as spending less than you earn, investing prudently and holding for the long term, outperforms brilliance that is constantly in motion. Avoiding stupidity is more important than seeking genius. The surest way to remain poor is to spend more than you earn, borrow at high interest, and chase quick returns. Debt is an anchor on compounding because it grows against you at rates that often exceed what you can earn. Leverage magnifies everything, gains and losses. Many smart people destroy themselves by borrowing to accelerate their wealth building. It works beautifully until it does not. Then it wipes them out. Resisting the urge to take on leverage when it seems like everyone else is getting rich faster is a test most fail. They do not understand that wealth only needs to be built once. If you risk ruin to speed it up, you may have to start over several times, each time with less time remaining for compounding to do its work. Envy is a silent killer of sound financial plans. Watching others acquire more faster leads to reckless decisions. People who were content with their steady progress suddenly feel inadequate. They abandon a disciplined approach to chase investments they do not understand or to fund lifestyles they cannot sustain. They forget that appearances are often deceptive. That neighbor with the new car may be drowning in debt. That colleague who bought a bigger house may be one job loss away from foreclosure. Envy pushes people to take risks unrelated to their goals. It invites comparison and drains satisfaction. Rejecting envy frees you to focus on your own trajectory. Your path need not match anyone else's timeline. The only comparison that matters is between yourself and your own plan. Self-pity is another mental error that guarantees stagnation. It feeds a narrative of helplessness. It convinces you that circumstances are unfair and that trying is pointless. While misfortune happens, indulging in self-pity does nothing to change outcomes. It paralyzes action. You cannot build wealth if you believe the deck is permanently stacked against you. You can, however, avoid behaviors that make your situation worse. Inversion, a simple mental tool, helps here. Instead of asking how to get rich, ask what guarantees poverty. Listing those behaviors, overspending, not saving, taking on high-interest debt, being unreliable, makes clear what to avoid. Success often comes from avoiding stupidity more than from being exceptionally clever. Your earning power is not fixed, but it is contingent on continuous learning and reliability. People rise in life not because they were born smarter, but because they dedicate themselves to learning more and proving themselves dependable. The world pays for value. Your responsibility is to increase the value you deliver. This does not mean jumping into fields you do not understand. It means identifying your aptitudes and staying within your circle of competence. When you play games you understand, you tilt the odds in your favor. When you venture into areas you do not comprehend, you risk losses you cannot foresee. Expanding your competence slowly and deliberately through study is far more effective than dabbling in unfamiliar territory because someone else seems to be making money there. The compounding process passes through milestones. The first significant one is the initial threshold of savings that provides a cushion and begins to earn visible returns. The next is the point where the returns on your savings equal the annual contributions you make. After that, the returns exceed your contributions, and your capital works harder than you do. These milestones require time, discipline, and consistency. There are no shortcuts. The sooner you start, the longer compounding has to operate. Every year you delay is a year of growth you will never recover. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Building wealth is not about accumulating possessions. It is about acquiring freedom. Freedom to choose work you enjoy rather than work you endure out of necessity. Freedom to say no to toxic people and situations. Freedom to endure setbacks without panic. This freedom arrives when your capital provides enough income that your well-being is not dependent on any single job or client. It is not the number that matters. It is the autonomy it brings. Reaching this point requires that you continue to live below your means even as your means expand. Lifestyle inflation is a stealthy thief. Every dollar spent on conspicuous consumption is a dollar that cannot compound. Keeping expenses stable while income rises creates a widening gap that fuels compounding. This is how wealth transitions from modest savings to substantial independence. After crossing the threshold and seeing the power of compounding, do not become complacent. Many people, flush with apparent success, drift into more complex financial products pitched by those who profit from complexity. Complexity often benefits the seller. Simplicity, in contrast, benefits the buyer. Most people do not need exotic instruments. They need to save consistently and invest in diversified, understandable assets. Checking your investments frequently leads to anxiety and rash decisions. Markets fluctuate. If you cannot tolerate temporary declines, you should not be in volatile assets. Understanding your own temperament is part of staying within your circle of competence. There will always be reasons to believe that building wealth is harder now than it was before. Each generation faces unique challenges. Greater competition exists. Some opportunities of the past are gone. But the fundamental arithmetic of compounding is unchanged. Spending less than you earn, saving diligently, investing sensibly, and letting time do its work are still the keys. Accepting that it is harder does not change what is required. It only means you must work with greater focus and avoid pitfalls with greater vigilance. Complaining about difficulty solves nothing. Acting on the timeless principles does. Relationships matter. The people you admire and work with influence your trajectory. Align yourself with those who operate with principles you respect. Mutual respect and shared values lead to opportunities that are not available in purely transactional interactions. Being useful to people you admire, operating with fairness and reliability, and prioritizing win-win outcomes are strategies that build networks of trust. These networks open doors to ventures and investments that are invisible to outsiders. But they appear only after you have accumulated some capital and proved yourself dependable. When wealth begins to accumulate, maintain the habits that built it. Do not suddenly increase spending or take on leverage to accelerate gains. Do not abandon the simple disciplines that brought you here. Recognize that the purpose of wealth is freedom, not display. Use it to secure your independence, not to advertise your status. Resist the urge to prove anything to anyone. Let your wealth serve your life, not your ego. The hardest part of compounding is the beginning. Surviving the flat part of the exponential curve requires discipline, patience, and faith in arithmetic. It requires resisting social pressure to consume. It requires ignoring the apparent progress of others. It requires saving in the face of slow growth. Once you cross that first threshold, The dynamics change subtly but significantly. Your money starts working, your identity shifts, temptations to quit persist, but so does the evidence that staying the course yields results. The rest of the journey is an exercise in consistent behavior. If you can endure the initial frustration and avoid the behavioral traps that derail most people, you will experience the part of the curve where progress becomes obvious. In the end, building wealth is not an emotional story. It is procedural. It follows rules that do not care about feelings, excuses, or hopes. Poverty persists when behavior guarantees it. Wealth emerges when behavior aligns with the arithmetic of compounding. Intelligence alone does not override indiscipline. Luck helps, but discipline matters more. The quiet, unglamorous actions repeated over many years beat bursts of brilliance. Poverty is behavioral. Wealth is procedural. Discipline applied over time wins.